The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome into Crossed Flags. Steve West, Matt Nicholson, episode number 27. Coming up a little bit later on, charters, and more charters. Not for everybody. We'll detail it all coming up in a little bit. And we'll also get into some other news. In fact, let's talk about some highlights here, first things first. Congratulations out to this team right here. They seem to be peaking at the right time. Cole Custer, Xfinity Series driver, defending Xfinity Series champion, grabs the win at Bristol, grabs the regular season championship, and seems to be in pretty good shape to set himself up for defending his title.
Yeah, he's arguably in the best shape right now because it seems to me like Justin Allgaier may be regressing a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that was very uncharacteristic of him at Bristol to have a bad race.
Yes.
Even though he got caught up in a little bit of a skirmish, but still. Very uncharacteristic.
Justin Allgaier does seem to be able to figure out how to get himself away from these things or see them before they're happening and be able to avoid them. Right. So, I agree, uncharacteristic of it. Then Saturday night was cutoff race time, and Kyle Larson just kind of made a laughingstock out of this whole thing. And I get where a lot of people say, he led 462 with the 500 laps. It was boring and all that. Here's the thing. I've got a slightly different take on that. To be able to lead 462 of 500 laps at a track like Bristol is actually quite amazing.
If you go back to, I'm going to say, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s, things like this weren't all that terribly uncommon.
But nowadays?
Nowadays it is uncommon because you're basically racing a spec race car. I'm taking those words out of a crew chief's mouth that said it on social media this week.
That's true.
You're basically racing a spec race car. And it's who's going to outdrive who because everybody's got the same stuff, basically. And then you have yesterday on
somebody's show.
Well, trying to be politically correct here.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The weekly segment with Elton Sawyer on the morning drive on Sirius XM NASCAR radio. Let's word it that way.
You can tell we're not really big fans of that particular segment.
Because every time Elton Sawyer opens his mouth, he sticks his foot in it, and he doesn't halfway understand what he's making sense of what he says, in my opinion. We're just baffled because the tire didn't do what we thought it was going to do. Well, first off, you probably have about a 20-degree ambient air temperature change from March to this past weekend, approximately 20. You have the racetrack that has been sprayed with PJ with the compound to help with grip. Let's just say that. I think it was the PJ1 they sprayed on the bottom.
If I remember right, yeah.
Okay. The racetrack, the groove worked itself up, and you had other compounds that were laid down on the track as well from the Busch Xfinity race.
You know, them.
And the Truck Series race, and ARCA.
Yeah. The thing about it is that this was a lot closer to what we saw last fall versus what we saw in the spring. Spring, obviously, very vastly different circumstances compared to what we saw this fall. As you noted, 3 other different series had already run there. It was much warmer. The track accepted rubber a lot better, just like it did last fall. This spring, totally different situation. So, just because you bring the same tire doesn't mean you're going to get the same situation even 2 weeks after, much less several months after the fact.
Denny Hamlin said it spot on, hitting the head of the 16-penny nail with a 20-pound sledgehammer. He said it perfectly on his deal that he does on Mondays, Actions Detrimental. You're trying to fix a car problem with a tire. The tire's not going to fix the car.
No.
You have to fix the car before you fix the tire.
Yeah. And, we've mentioned that we've noted this here since this particular car came into effect now in its third year. This seemed to make the intermediate tracks, those 1.5 mile tracks, better, but at the expense of the short track racing.
It's a virtual flip from where it was with the Gen 6 car, which I miss, the Gen 6 car versus the Gen 7 car. Short tracks, the Gen 6 car was lights out.
Sure, it was great racing.
Intermediate tracks, terrible.
Yeah. One car would get out front, nobody could catch him, and even if they could catch him, they couldn't get around him.
And now you flip it, Gen 7 car, intermediates and intermediates up to the 2 miles, even considering Michigan, lights out. Short tracks, non-existent. So what gives?
Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't think that they know. So
some of them don't.
I mean, this goes back to what we were talking, and I get it. We always constantly go through the fact that we're updating the racers, right? This is the Gen 7 car. There have been 6 generations before it. But the problem is that as you go through updates, you get the law of unintended consequences because you're going to go through and you're going to change something. You're going to fix something. Well, even though you fixed that problem, what other problem was created because you fixed that one?
You fix one and it reverses the other one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
In this case, that's exactly what it did. So, the work will continue. Will it help? I don't know. Truth be told. A little bit of a note in Formula One here. Over the weekend, we noted on the weekend show, the big show, so to speak, CRN on Saturday, that Max Verstappen got himself into a little bit of trouble with the FIA. And what Max Verstappen basically did was he arrived in Singapore. They do a Thursday pre-weekend press conference, and he got to talking about something. And, well, he used a couple of words that we're not going to use here, even though we're a podcast and we can get away with it. We don't know who's listening and what age, so we're going to keep it that particular way. But he said a bad word, okay? The FIA came down and said, we don't particularly care for that word, and because of that, we're going to penalize you by saying you have to do the equivalent of community service. They used really flowery, long-term words and language to create that, but he has to do something within the public interest. He's got to do community service. Okay, fine. You want to have some form of penalty for this particular situation, that's fine. Make it clear ahead of time what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow. Federal Communications Commission, they cover that for radio and television over the air here in the United States of America. The FIA, get it defined. These are the words you can't use. You use these words. This is your penalty if you use it in a pre-weekend press conference or over the team radio. If you're really interested in doing that, get it clearly defined. What is the penalty? On the other hand, there's also Max Verstappen, who's taking this to an absurd level, who he said after the weekend was over that, yeah, this might make me quit early. Dude, you're 26 years old. You're making millions upon millions of euros, millions upon millions of dollars in the equivalent for racing a race car. How hard is it to watch what you say? And if you're really insistent upon using language that you will get in trouble for, and therefore it might make you quit, then quit. Go home. Take your steering wheel and head on down the road. Nobody except your most ardent fans are really going to miss you. And even you noted, Formula One will continue on without you.
There's a big difference between when you say something like that in a press conference setting versus if you say something like that when you've got your helmet on and your team communications and you're talking back and forth with your team. Monstrous difference.
Oh, I would agree.
Monstrous difference. The difference is on that one, the difference is you've got somebody in front of you that you're just like, you don't care. But at the same time, this may sound confusing here. you're saying press conference is like you're in an open setting. When you're behind the wheel and you got your helmet on, to a degree, it's a closed setting, if you follow what I'm saying.
It is. The obvious problem being, and we see this on the broadcast for IndyCar, Formula One, and NASCAR all the time, the fact that both radio and television have access to the team communication, and they'll play it on the air.
That's why a lot of times you will see them delay it to where they're like, hey, let's scan this, make sure, okay, we're good. Or a few moments ago, so-and-so said this, here we got what they said.
Right.
Beep, 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 beep.
Yes.
That's all you hear.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That is incumbent upon the radio network or the television network, to me, that is doing this. Because, again, heat of the moment, behind the wheel, something happens, word slips out, we get that. You have control over what you're saying in a press conference. You walk in there with cameras and microphones on you. This isn't heat of the moment. This is just reporters asking you questions and you answering them. It's not that difficult, truth be told, especially in this day and age where somebody like a Max Verstappen, who is in his 20s, is used to having these things around all the time. And I show a cell phone because that means there's a microphone and a camera that are available, if not in use, at all times. And you have to make the presumption, not assumption, the presumption. In other words, you have to go in expecting those to be on and to be recording. And once you make that presumption, you get into a press conference situation, it changes your mindset.
That it does.
Or it should.
That it should, yeah. It should.
So again, Max, I say this and I mean this wholeheartedly. You're a great racer, man. You're moving way up the all-time wins chart, and you're doing things that very few other drivers have ever been able to do in this series, or in any series for that matter. You are absolutely dominating it. If this is going to make you quit, as opposed to you figuring out a way to change your own ways of doing things, grab your helmet, grab your steering wheel, go home.
Take your jet that you bought from Sir Richard Branson and go back to Monaco.
Yeah, or wherever you want to live. Doesn't matter.
Monaco.
Yeah. What do we got behind us? IndyCar's been talking about doing this for a little while now because Roger Penske, once he bought the IndyCar Series, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and put them all under the Penske Entertainment roof, realized that the charter situation in NASCAR does have its faults, but by and large, it does seem to have done some pretty good things too.
Yeah.
Okay. The amount of money that these teams are putting into these vehicles, having a charter that guarantees them a start, is a way of rewarding them. Because again, we're talking millions of dollars. Top flight NASCAR team, $25-ish million to put out there. That's one car. Then you look at a Hendrick Motorsports, which puts 4 cars out there each and every week in the Cup Series. That's $100 million for that race, for that season, for that particular number. That's not an easy thing to swallow. So to guarantee that they were to get something in return, they get charters, which guarantees they are going to start a race. IndyCar and Roger Penske looked at it and said, I think we can do something similar for IndyCar. And this is important because now we're beginning to see more and more interest. When you and I started talking about IndyCar on various versions of the weekend show, Championship Racing Network, 21, maybe 22, sometimes 24 cars were starting, and to get a full 33-car field in the Indy 500 was a little bit of a challenge.
It was.
Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to see a whole lot more interest generated in IndyCar. And as of the season that we just ended, there were 27 full-time racers, and they didn't have any problem filling the Indy 500. Next year, Prima Racing's coming in. We talked about them on the podcast last week, remember? And they're bringing in 2 more full-time cars, one of which they filled with Callum Ilott. We're still waiting on the announcement for the other driver, by the way. 29 cars, 27 slots. Charter is going to guarantee a certain number will actually qualify, but not the full field. 2 cars will have to qualify. 2 cars are in the open position. 25 charters are going to be handed out. This is the breakdown here. AJ Foyt, Andretti Global, Arrow McLaren. You can see the numbers out beside them so that you know who's getting what. The charter agreement limits teams to owning 3 teams in the IndyCar series each so that you get to spread it out a little bit more. It meant, for example, Chip Ganassi Racing had to sell off 2 cars. Prima Racing should be right there, ready to play catch in all of this. Otherwise, not really much of a change. Everybody else is pretty much the same. It does stop Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan from saying, hey, we're thinking about maybe we could go to 4. It also stops Team Penske from expanding back out to 4.
Ray Hall needs to stay at 3 until they can get their stuff together.
Yeah.
Because they've been virtually irrelevant for some odd reason. And they've struggled mightily for 2 years in a row at the Indy 500 when they should not have, in my opinion.
No. So that's,
yeah.
Either way, that's the breakdown of it. 25 cars guaranteed to start each and every race throughout the year. Save 1 race. Charter situation has no effect on the Indy 500. Indy 500, again, 33-car starting field. They want the tradition of bump day to continue. And for those of you that are not all that familiar with IndyCar and what a bump day might be, if you get 35, 40, however many that decide they want to come in and try to qualify, if Matt and I fielded a team, we could go and attempt to qualify for the Indy 500. And like you mentioned, when it came to Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan, if Matt could put his car inside the 33-car field, he might bump out a Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan car, an Arrow McLaren car, an Andretti Global car. If you happen to have a bad day in qualifying and somebody else comes in, just some upstart team CRN comes in and happens to do it, we could actually bump out a big-name driver and a big-name team out of the Indy 500.
Dear Prima, I know you're running Chevrolet engines. Call me. I will attempt it.
Sure.
I will attempt it. That's more than fine that they're going with 25 guarantees, because those 25 guarantees that you see right here are the ones that are there every week.
Yes.
Their haulers are rolling through the tunnel or crossing over the crossover gate, staging up in the paddock area. That's fine. Leave it at the 27 and you've got the 2 open slots. So if you have maybe a 28th or a 29th try to come in and qualify for the 26th and 27th spot, make it a dogfight. Because there's been a lot of the series overall. IndyCar, even really can't count top 4 of NASCAR, because ARCA, you may get 10 one week and you may have 40 the next.
Yeah.
Okay. Between trucks, mainly trucks and Xfinity. Here lately, you may have 1, maybe 2 fighting for those last spots and maybe on the verge of going home. Okay. Like the truck entry list this week at Kansas. 34 are only on the entry list for 36 spots. So everybody's going to be in the show regardless. Xfinity, I think, is set as a hard 38, so everybody's going to start. Bring back that lore of who's going to outrun who and make the show. Because it kind of perturbs me a little bit that we've lost that lore across motorsports in general.
Yeah. We're really only seeing it in a lot of ways for the big specialty races. Daytona 500, 40 starting positions in the Cup Series. For the Daytona 500, we might see 42 cars. Maybe.
I think the most Cup cars we've seen lately in the last few years have been 43.
Yeah.
At the most.
And part of that is Chicago as well, just because of the fascination with how new and different it is.
Yep.
Okay, and we get that. How do we make that translate throughout the course of the year? In this case, the 2 open spots, it does do the reward, like you said. The 2 newest teams are the teams that right now are without a charter. And unfortunately, that belongs both, I believe, to Juncos Hollinger Racing. I have to double check on that, but I think that I saw that. And then, of course, Prima Performance. We'll see what happens with them. I'm not going to discount Prima, and I'm certainly not going to discount Juncos Hollinger, because we have seen what they can do. We saw what they can do in the last 3-4 races of this year. It looked like they were really stepping things up right there. And Prima, they've got a whole lot of experience in the Formula One feeder series. Yeah, I don't think it'd take them too terrifically long to get a hold of this and start being able to qualify regularly for races, which moves them up through the system. Wouldn't surprise me in one bit at all.
None at all, because here of late, I'm going to say within the last 6 to 8 years, anybody that you've seen come over from the Formula One series, be in the top 3, F1, F2, and F3, if they come over and dabble within the IndyCar ranks, more times than none, they're gaining success pretty quick.
Sure, yeah.
See Roman Grosjean.
Yeah. He's had, even though he hasn't won, he's probably had more success with his time in IndyCar than he did in his entire F1 career.
Granted, the stint at Andretti did not go like I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
I thought he would have won a handful. He was in contention to win a handful, but either mistakes that were not of his doing or mistakes that were of his doing took him out of a lot of it.
It did. It did.
So,
and one other thing that he noted has come true. Meyer Shank Racing has decided to give Logan Sargent a test session. Now, Meyer Shank Racing is already set up driver lineup-wise for 2025, but this is an opportunity for Logan Sargent, who got bounced out of his F1 ride, remember. That's an opportunity for him to showcase his wares, and this is a chance for him to get somebody from IndyCar to sit up and take notice.
Dale Coyne.
Dale Coyne has at least one seat available for 2025.
Because 2 seats got claimed just a few moments ago.
By all means, break that out.
25 minutes ago was released that the 2 new pilots, 2 pilots for 2025 and beyond for Ed Carpenter Racing. In the 21 car, you will have Christian Rasmussen.
That's a good call.
He's moving from the 20 to the 21.
Yeah, that's a good call. Put him in full time. We kind of saw that happening when we heard that Ed Carpenter was going to step out for the final couple races of the year, Worldwide Tech Raceway at Gateway, and then Nashville Superspeedway oval track races, which that's what Ed Carpenter tends to run. Let's, in this case, Christian Rasmussen run the road and street courses. So, yeah, we kind of saw this coming. In the 20 car, are we splitting?
20 car is not going to be a split.
Ooh, Ed Carpenter stepping away.
Sitting in the 20 car full time will be Alexander Rossi.
That is a good move on Ed Carpenter's part.
Very good move.
That is a good move on Ed Carpenter's part.
Apparently there's a new investor coming into ECR, and that helped lure Rossi over.
Yeah.
And he will be in the 20.
So A.J. Foyt's done, Andretti's done, Arrow McLaren, Ganassi. Dale Coyne still waiting on him. Ed Carpenter's taken care of. Juncos Hollinger has not made a final decision on Romain Grosjean. So potentially
I think
one
he'll
seat
be
there.
back.
I think he'll be back, but again, it hasn't been confirmed. So we say potentially one seat there. Meyer Shank's good. Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, and Team Penske, they're all good. That leaves Prima. One seat there, the Dale Coyne pair, and one maybe at Juncos Hollinger. Logan Sargent, show it off and show it off well. You got one chance. Bring it.
Yeah.
Then there's the saga of Rackley War Racing, specifically Ty Dillon. It was not quite this time last year. It was just under a year ago right now that Rackley War Racing had a guy by the name of Matt DiBenedetto behind the wheel. And Matt DiBenedetto said, with 4 or 5 races left in the year, I forget which, that he was not going to be back in the Rackley War Racing number 25 Chevrolet Silverado in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2024. So with 3 races left, Rackley War said, see ya, we don't need you. Booted him. Got a ride in the Xfinity Series. And then they filled in for the rest of the year. And then they brought Ty Dillon.
Yep.
Ty Dillon lost his ride in the Cup Series because he's done nothing in the Cup Series. So he gets the ride.
He's done nothing nowhere.
I know. He gets the ride in the Craftsman Truck Series for Rackley War, and does nothing.
This team that Matt DiBenedetto took to victory lane puts him in the seat that's arguably got as much experience at the top levels as DiBenedetto has.
Yeah, maybe even more.
The team did not progress. They regressed.
Agreed wholeheartedly.
And they had Shane Wilson, somebody that's had a high level of success with the likes of Matt Crafton, Brendan Gaughan, and others on the top of the pit box. They regressed. Why?
That's the $1 million question, and Rackley War has decided that for the rest of the year, Ty Dillon's out, and they're going to replace him with a youngster by the name of Dawson Sutton. What does Dawson Sutton bring that Ty Dillon doesn't?
Outside of that, Daddy owns the truck. See where we're going with this, kids? Mm-hmm. Dad owns the truck. This is me not taking away from the kid's abilities. He's a sharp little late model racer. He's won quite a few. He's won quite a few across the region east of the Mississippi. Let's say that. He's won his fair share. He has 2 Truck Series starts. North Wilkesboro, Nashville. He wrecked out on lap 6 of the ARCA race at Bristol. But we're going to throw him in the truck in the next 2 races at Kansas and Talladega.
And by the way, just for record-keeping purposes, that guy, Ty Dillon, is going to be his driver coach. Okay. Good luck.
You're going to put an 18-year-old kid in a truck that does not... So apparently his super speedway clearance race is going to be Kansas this week.
Okay.
In the words of the comedian Ron White, I don't think so, Scooter.
One of these things is not like the other. Got news for you. Talladega, not like Kansas. Kansas, not like Talladega. Sorry, it ain't. This ought to be interesting. Rackley War Racing is one of those teams that I will admit to when I first heard about them, I had a soft spot for. Because we as Americans, as a general rule, we love the underdog. You know, we love the sad sack story. We loved it when the Chicago Cubs were the lovable losers and it took them 108 years to win a World Series. We loved it when the Boston Red Sox took 86 years to win a World Series because we wanted to root for them. We want to root for the little guy to beat the big guy, David versus Goliath, right? I wanted to root for Rackley War. These moves, I have a hard time rooting for them now.
These personnel moves are questionable at best. When you got the co-owner of the team, Willie Allen, as reputable as he is in the motorsports world as suspension products for shocks mainly, not only in the asphalt world, but in dirt as well. As reputable as he is, he should know better.
One would think.
But when you've got Curtis Sutton, i.e. Dawson's pop, footing the majority of the bill because Rackley Roofing is a very large company in the state of Tennessee.
Yes, it is.
Very large and growing rapidly in the Southeast.
Yeah. Yeah, they do a good job with roofs. If you need a roof, they wouldn't be the worst ones to call. I can tell you that right now.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they've got their corporate sponsorship with the Tennessee Titans for a reason.
Yes.
They're one of them.
Sure.
But
yeah. You're making some questionable moves here. The fact that you allowed Matt DiBenedetto, the one driver who actually has taken you to victory lane, to escape and you've replaced him with somebody who has literally won nothing, and then turn around and replace him with a driver who has barely more experience than Matt and I combined, you've got a problem. You've got a big-time problem, and you better figure it out, Rackley War, because otherwise you're going to be doing what Rick Ware has been doing in the Cup Series for a long time, and that's throwing good money after bad because you're not performing. Up until this year, anyway, with Justin Haley.
Yeah, and what
just happened with Justin Haley, by the way?
You let him slip away.
That's right. They made a trade. I'm not trying to take anything away from Corey LaJoie, but you get a driver who's actually making you a top 15 and top 10 fairly regular appearance for the first time really ever in Rick Ware Racing's history, and you let him go?
You're regressing.
You're making questionable decisions, Rackley War. Figure it out. Get your personnel situation straightened out and go find a driver like a Matt DiBenedetto who, again, is going to return you to victory lane and figure out a way to keep that driver. That's the best advice we can give you.
Bingo.
Coming up on Saturday, Coach Matt, weather permitting, obviously, we've got this hurricane starting to churn up in the Gulf right now, Helene. How that'll affect us come Saturday, not sure just yet. But at this point in time, Coach Matt has a youth football game, 9 o'clock Saturday morning. He'll be with us by phone.
As of right now, we strapping the skis up, baby.
And so I'll have the show in studio to myself after that. But yeah, we're going to bring you a 2-hour show this Saturday morning. Hope you join us then. And episode number 27 comes this time next week. Thank you very much for joining us. We will see you Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central Time, CRN Live on YouTube. Hope you join us then. And, of course, don't forget about Crossed Flags, the podcast, coming up again next Wednesday.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.